In the small, unassuming town of Elderwood, the night began like any other, with the sky painted in deep shades of indigo and the air carrying a crispness that hinted at the coming of autumn. But for a group of 6 friends, this night was to be anything but ordinary. They had planned this trip for weeks, a night of thrill and camaraderie in the ancient woods that skirted their town, known as Grey Pine Forest. The group consisted of Jake, the unofficial leader, with his broad shoulders and easy smile; Mia, his sharp-witted girlfriend; Lucas, the quiet one with a keen eye for photography; Emma, whose laughter could light up any room; Tyler, the adrenaline junkie; and Zoe, the newcomer, who had recently moved to Elderwood and was eager to make friends. They met at the edge of town as the sun dipped below the horizon, their backpacks laden with tents, sleeping bags, and, of course, marshmallows for toasting over the campfire. Their destination was a small clearing in the heart of Grey Pine Forest, a spot Jake had discovered the previous summer. The trek into the forest was filled with playful banter and the crunching of leaves underfoot. Lucas snapped photos of the twisted branches silhouetted against the twilight sky, while Mia recounted tales of the forest's eerie history. It was said that Grey Pine had once been home to a hermit known only as Old Man Craven, who disappeared without a trace, leaving behind whispers of curses and ghostly apparitions. Upon reaching the clearing, the friends quickly set up camp. The campfire was soon crackling, casting a warm glow that kept the forest's chill at bay. As the night deepened, they huddled around the fire, their faces flickering in the light, and the time came for what they had all been waiting for: the telling of ghost stories. One by one, they shared tales of haunted houses, spectral figures seen in the dead of night, and unexplained phenomena. Emma, with a dramatic flair, told the story of a mirror that held the spirit of a vengeful witch. Tyler spoke of a shadowy creature that roamed the highways, preying on unwary travelers. As the stories grew darker, the forest seemed to lean in closer, the sounds of rustling leaves and distant howls mingling with their words. Zoe, the last to speak, hesitated before beginning her story. She spoke of a monstrous creature, a ghastly beast with eyes like coals and claws that could slice through bone. It roamed forests, hunting those who dared to trespass in its domain. The group chuckled nervously as Zoe described the creature's grotesque features and insatiable hunger for human fear. But their laughter died in their throats when a sudden sharp crack echoed through the trees. Silence fell, each one holding their breath, eyes darting to the shadowy woods that surrounded them. Jake was the first to stand, trying to pierce the darkness with his gaze. "Probably just a deer," he murmured, though his voice lacked conviction. As they settled back around the fire, trying to regain the comfortable camaraderie of earlier, the unease lingered like a thick fog. They didn't notice the pair of glowing eyes watching them from the darkness, nor the hulking shape that moved with unnatural silence through the underbrush. It was only when the creature stepped into the flickering light of the campfire, its horrifying visage clearer than any story could capture, that the friends realized their night of horror stories had become a night of true horror. The beast from Zoe's tale was no longer just a story. It was there, in the flesh, and the hunt had begun. As screams tore through the night and chaos erupted around the campfire, 2 thoughts ran through everyone's mind: survive the night and escape the woods, but as they would soon discover, not all of them would make it out alive. Panic seized the group as the creature emerged into the light of the campfire, its grotesque features more terrifying than anything Zoe had conjured in her story. It stood on twisted limbs, towering over them, its body covered in matted fur and its eyes burning with a malevolent glow. The air seemed to grow colder as it breathed, a sound like the wheezing of a broken bellows. Jake reacted first, grabbing a burning log from the fire and brandishing it at the creature. "Back off!" he shouted, his voice cracking with fear. The beast recoiled slightly from the flames, but did not retreat into the darkness of the forest. Mia grabbed Zoe and pulled her back, whispering urgently, "We need to run, now!" The reality of their situation was setting in. They were not characters in one of their ghost stories, immune to the consequences of the night. This threat was real and lethal. Without waiting for Jake's agreement, Mia led the charge, pulling Zoe along as she sprinted into the trees. Tyler and Emma followed, their breaths coming in short, terrified gasps. Lucas hesitated, looking back at Jake, who was still facing off with the creature. "Jake, come on!" Lucas called out, his voice laden with desperation. With a final defiant yell, Jake threw the burning log at the creature, which let out a guttural growl as the flames singed its fur. Seizing the moment, Jake turned and ran, catching up with Lucas as they dashed after the others. The forest was a blur as they ran, branches whipping against their faces and roots threatening to trip them at every step. They were driven by sheer instinct, their minds blank with terror, except for the overwhelming urge to escape. Behind them, the sounds of the creature crashing through the forest spurred them on. It was fast, its movements unnaturally silent for its size. They could hear its labored breathing and feel the intensity of its gaze on their backs, as if it could burn into their very souls. As they ran, the realization hit them. They were being hunted. This creature was no mindless beast. It was intelligent, deliberate in its pursuit, and it was isolating them one by one. Tyler, the fastest among them, had taken the lead, and without realizing it, had distanced himself from the group. His foot caught on a hidden root, and he went sprawling to the ground with a cry of pain. As he tried to rise, a shadow loomed over him, the creature standing between him and the others. "Tyler!" Emma screamed, stopping in her tracks. "No, keep going!" Tyler yelled back, scrambling to his feet. He faced the creature, his hands raised in a futile gesture of defense. The creature tilted its head, almost curiously, before lunging. The scream that ripped through the night was cut abruptly short, sending a wave of horror through the remaining friends. Tears streamed down Emma's face as she turned and continued running, the others pulling her along. They didn't stop, didn't look back, even as their hearts broke for their friend. They knew the creature was still behind them, and their survival depended on their ability to keep moving. The forest seemed endless, each turn and twist taking them deeper into a labyrinth of shadows and fear. But as the initial burst of adrenaline wore off, fatigue began to set in, their breaths ragged, their limbs heavy with exhaustion. Jake, taking on the role of leader once again, directed them towards a rocky outcropping he remembered from previous hikes. "There," he gasped, pointing. "We can hide there. Regroup." As they approached the rocks, the distant howls of the creature echoed through the trees, a grim reminder that their nightmare was far from over. They were safe for the moment, but they knew it was only a matter of time before the hunt would resume. And this time, they would have to be ready. As the 5 remaining friends stumbled into the shelter of the rocky outcropping, the oppressive silence of the forest was broken only by their heavy breathing and the distant, eerie calls of the creature. Their temporary haven was a small cave, formed by boulders that had fallen long ago, creating a natural barrier against the elements, and, they hoped, against their pursuer. Inside the cave, the dim light from Jake's hastily lit flashlight flickered across their pale, frightened faces. They huddled together, trying to regain their breath and composure after the relentless chase. Mia wrapped her arms around Zoe, who was shivering, her eyes wide with shock. "We need a plan," Jake said, his voice low but firm, cutting through the murmurs of despair. "We can't just stay here. It's only a matter of time before it finds us." Lucas, who had been quiet since they stopped, finally spoke up, his voice shaky. "What is that thing? It's like it came straight out of Zoe's story." Zoe, looking guilt-ridden, shook her head slowly. "I don't know. I made it up. Or I thought I did. It was just a legend I read about once, twisted into a campfire tale." Emma, still tearful from the loss of Tyler, clenched her fists. "It doesn't matter where it came from. We need to focus on getting out of here alive. We should keep moving, try to make it back to the edge of the forest by dawn." They agreed to move at first light, spending the few remaining hours of darkness to rest and gather their strength. Jake and Lucas took turns keeping watch at the entrance of the cave, peering out into the night, listening for any signs of movement. As dawn approached, the forest seemed to awaken. the sounds of birds and rustling foliage bringing a deceptive sense of normalcy. Their break was over. It was time to move. They checked their supplies, limited food, a first aid kit, and a couple of flashlights with dying batteries. Not much, but they would have to make do. Moving cautiously, they left the cave, the morning light filtering through the trees, casting long shadows that twisted and turned, playing tricks on their eyes. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent jolts of fear through their tired bodies. They made their way toward what they hoped was the direction of the town, guided by Jake's memory of the forest's layout. The terrain became rougher, and the underbrush thicker, slowing their progress. As they pushed through a particularly dense thicket, a sudden realization hit them. They were not alone. A low growl resonated through the air, and they froze in place. The creature was nearby, stalking them once again. Its presence was oppressive, a palpable force that seemed to suck the air from their lungs. "It's circling us," Lucas whispered, his eyes scanning the surrounding trees. "It's playing with us." Panic threatened to set in again, but Mia's voice cut through the tension. "Keep moving. Don't let it see we're scared." Her voice was surprisingly steady, each word a defiant challenge to the fear that gripped them. As they continued, the forest seemed to close in around them, the trees like bars of a cage from which there was no escape. They stumbled upon a small clearing, and without warning, the creature charged from the underbrush directly at them. Reacting instantly, Jake and Lucas threw themselves at the beast with shouts of defiance, trying to give the others a chance to escape. The creature swatted them aside like rag dolls, its strength terrifying. Mia, Emma, and Zoe ran for their lives, their hearts pounding in their chests. Behind them, the sounds of struggle faded, replaced by a horrifying silence that was worse than any scream. As they ran, the harsh realization that they might never see their friends again weighed heavily on them. But there was no time to mourn, no time to look back. Their only hope was to keep moving, to survive, and to carry the memory of their friends with them out of the dark heart of Grey Pine Forest. The forest seemed endless, its dense foliage a maze of shadows and deception. Mia, Emma, and Zoe pressed on, their bodies fueled by adrenaline and fear. With each step, the horror of what had occurred weighed heavily on them, but they dared not stop, dared not give the beast another chance to strike. The early morning light did little to penetrate the thick canopy above, casting an eerie twilight that matched their somber mood. They moved in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, mourning Jake and Lucas in the quiet despair of their hearts. As they navigated the uneven terrain, Emma stumbled, her foot catching on a root. She fell hard, her cry of pain echoing through the silent woods. Mia and Zoe quickly helped her up, checking her ankle, which was twisted painfully. "We can't go fast anymore," Mia said, her voice thick with frustration. "But we can't stop. It's still out there." Zoe, looking around nervously, spotted a narrow animal trail. "Maybe we can use this. It should be easier to walk, and we might cover ground faster." Helping Emma between them, they followed the trail which meandered through the underbrush and into denser parts of the forest. Every noise startled them, a constant reminder that the creature could be lurking nearby, waiting for another opportunity. As they moved, Zoe's mind raced. The beast seemed connected to her story, but how? Was it possible that her tale had somehow brought the creature to life, or had it always existed, the story merely a forgotten truth passed down through generations? Lost in her thoughts, Zoe barely noticed when the trail opened up into a small clearing. Old, gnarled trees circled the space, their branches stretching out like twisted arms. In the center, a dilapidated cabin stood, its wood weathered and gray, as if it had been forgotten by time. "Look," whispered Emma, pointing towards the cabin. "Maybe we can hide there, just until we figure out what to do." Approaching cautiously, they entered the cabin. Inside, it was dark and musty, with a thick layer of dust covering everything. Old furniture lay scattered about, and a cold fireplace added to the bleak atmosphere. They barricaded the door with a heavy table and settled in, trying to make the best of their grim sanctuary. Mia explored a bit and found an old moldy bookshelf with a few scattered books. Flipping through them, she discovered they were journals, dating back decades. "These might tell us something about the creature," Mia said, her interest piqued despite their dire situation. As she read aloud, the entries revealed the cabin had once belonged to a hunter, who had spoken of a creature in the woods, a guardian of the forest that punished those who trespassed with ill intent. The descriptions matched the beast haunting them. "It's protecting the forest," Zoe realized, a chill running down her spine. "And we're the intruders." They pondered their next move, knowing they needed to leave but fearful of attracting the creature's wrath again. As they discussed, a sudden noise outside startled them. Peering through a crack in the boarded-up window, they saw it, the creature, pacing at the edge of the clearing as if waiting. "It knows we're here," Emma whispered, terror evident in her voice. They retreated from the window, hearts pounding. The realization that the creature was intelligent and possibly vengeful made them rethink their escape. They needed a plan, one that would allow them to leave the forest without further angering the guardian beast. As night began to fall, they prepared themselves. Using bits of information from the journals and their own understanding of the forest, they planned a route that would take them to the least dense part of the woods, avoiding known paths and hopefully escaping the creature's territory. "We have to try," Mia said, determination setting in. "We owe it to Jake and Lucas." With the darkness as their cover and a newfound resolve, they opened the cabin door, stepping into the cold night, ready to face whatever the forest held. The creature's eyes, glowing faintly in the distance, watched them as they began their tentative journey towards freedom. Under the cloak of night, Mia, Emma, and Zoe moved with quiet urgency. Each step was taken with care to avoid the crunch of dry leaves or the snap of twigs that might give them away to the lurking predator. The moon, partially obscured by scudding clouds, cast an unreliable light that created as many shadows as it dispelled. Their chosen path led them deeper into a part of the forest none of them had explored before. It was wilder here, the trees older, their massive trunks and sprawling roots like the ancient guardians of a secret world. The air was cooler, filled with the scent of moss and decay, a reminder of the forest's perpetual cycle of life and death. Zoe, leading the way with a flashlight she kept dimmed and directed at the ground, paused frequently to check their bearings. The old hunter's journals had mentioned a natural landmark, a creek that flowed clear and cold, winding its way through the heart of the forest. If they could find it, they could follow its course to the edge of the woods. As they approached a steep incline, the soft murmur of flowing water reached their ears. Heartened, they quickened their pace, but as they neared the bank of the creek, Emma stumbled, her flashlight swinging wildly. For a heart-stopping moment, the beam crossed something on the opposite bank, a pair of reflective, hateful eyes that vanished the instant the light touched them. They froze, every muscle taut with fear. Mia's breath came in short, sharp gasps. "It's here," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of the creek. "We have to keep moving," Zoe insisted, her voice a mix of fear and resolve. "It's watching us, testing us. We can't let it think we're easy prey." Crossing the creek proved difficult. The water was colder than they expected, its current stronger. Clutching each other's hands, they waded through, the water soaking their clothes and chilling their skin. Once on the other side, they felt a momentary surge of relief, until they realized the creature had effortlessly paralleled their path, its presence a constant shadow just beyond the reach of their light. Pushing forward, they relied on the natural barrier of the creek to guide them, hoping it would offer some protection. The terrain became rougher, the forest denser. Branches tugged at their clothing, and unseen roots threatened to trip them. Yet they moved with a desperate kind of grace, driven by the primal urge to survive. Hours passed, and the initial adrenaline that had fueled their flight began to wane. Exhaustion crept in, their soaked clothes heavy against their weary bodies. They had to rest, if only for a moment.
Finding a small copse ringed by thick bushes that offered some concealment, they huddled together, sharing their warmth and the meager protection it provided. Emma, her voice trembling, broke the silence. "What if we don't make it out?" "We will," Mia said firmly, though her own doubts gnawed at her. "We have to believe that. For them." As they rested, Zoe's thoughts wandered back to the creature. The journals had described it not just as a guardian, but as a spirit of the forest itself, manifesting to protect its sanctity. Was their very presence here a violation of some ancient pact? Or was there a way to appease the creature, to show their respect and perhaps earn its mercy? Before she could ponder further, a rustling sound snapped them to alertness. They barely breathed, listening intently. It was different this time, not the deliberate stalking movements of the creature, but something smaller, more frantic. A rabbit burst through the underbrush, its eyes wide with terror. And behind it, the woods remained silent, too silent. They knew then that the creature was close, perhaps waiting for them to make a mistake. With no time to lose, they gathered their scant energy and set off again, the rabbit's fate a stark reminder of their own precarious situation in this ancient, watchful forest. As the first light of dawn began to filter through the trees, they knew they were running out of time, and that their final challenge lay just ahead.
As dawn broke through the dense canopy of gray pine forest, its light brought little warmth but offered a faint glimmer of hope to Mia, Emma, and Zoe. They had survived the night, but the creature that haunted the shadows seemed undeterred by the rising sun. Its persistence was a chilling reminder of their perilous situation. The terrain gradually changed as they moved, the forest thinning as they neared its boundary. The sound of a distant roadway was like a siren call, urging them onward, promising salvation just beyond the tree line. However, the closer they got to freedom, the more oppressive the silence around them became, a sign that their hunter was still with them, watching, waiting for any sign of weakness. "We're almost there," Mia whispered, her voice strained with exhaustion. "Just a bit further." Zoe nodded, clutching the strap of her backpack tighter. She had been thinking about the creature, about what it represented. The journals mentioned respect and offerings to the spirits of the forest. "Maybe it's not just about escaping," she said thoughtfully. "Maybe we need to show it that we understand, that we respect this place." Emma looked skeptical, but there was a desperate hope in her eyes. "And how do we do that? What does it want?" Zoe thought back to the hunter's words in the journal, how he spoke of living in harmony with the forest, of taking only what was needed and giving back in return. "An offering," she replied. "Something meaningful, a gesture to show we don't mean harm." Without another word, Zoe slipped off her backpack and began rummaging through it. She pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden box, an heirloom from her grandmother that she had brought for good luck. It pained her to part with it, but as she placed the box gently on the ground, she felt a profound sense of rightness. The others watched, uncertain, but they too began to search through their belongings. Emma placed a small photo of the group, taken at the beginning of their trip, next to the box. It was a symbol of the memories they cherished, of the friends they had lost. Mia hesitated, then took off her favorite necklace, a simple silver chain with a pendant of intertwined leaves, an emblem of nature. She laid it carefully on the small pile. "For Jake and Lucas," she murmured. The offerings made, they stepped back, their gestures a silent plea for peace, for forgiveness. They waited, hearts pounding, unsure if their acts would be enough. Minutes passed, and the oppressive feeling in the air slowly began to dissipate. The forest around them seemed to breathe easier, the early light softening, the shadows retreating as if in deference to their tribute. No sight nor sound of the creature came to them. It was as if it had accepted their gesture, recognizing their respect. Feeling a weight lift from their shoulders, they resumed their trek toward the sound of the road, their steps lighter, their spirits cautiously uplifted. As they finally broke free of the tree line, the sight of the road was like a vision of the future, a future where the horror of the night could begin to fade into the past. But the forest and its guardian would remain, a wild boundary they had crossed and survived. a reminder of the delicate balance between humanity and the ancient, unseen forces of nature. As they walked towards the road, each of them knew that Grey Pine Forest would forever be a part of their lives, its lessons indelibly etched into their souls. The sun climbed higher, its rays chasing away the last vestiges of darkness as they reached the road, their ordeal behind them, but never forgotten. They were survivors, bound together by their shared experiences, by the stories they would tell, and the silent, watchful woods that continued to thrive just beyond the reach of civilization. Their rescue came soon after, a passing car stopping to help the three weary, mud-stained adventurers. As they drove away, the forest receded into the background, a dark silhouette against the morning light, silent and imposing, its secrets and its sentinel forever guarding the threshold between worlds. In the days that followed their harrowing escape from Grey Pine Forest, Mia, Emma, and Zoe found themselves grappling with the aftermath of their ordeal. The media swarmed around the story of the three young women who had survived a night of terror in the woods, fascinated by their tales of a monstrous creature that seemed torn from the pages of folklore. But beyond the flash of cameras and the probing questions, each of them was on a personal journey of healing and understanding. They reunited at Mia's house a week after their rescue, sitting in the quiet comfort of her living room, a stark contrast to the chaotic embrace of the forest. The familiarity of the setting did little to ease the tension that hung between them, each lost in their own reflections. "I keep thinking about it," Emma confessed, breaking the silence. Her eyes were distant, her voice a soft echo of her usual vibrant tone, about how real it all felt, how close we came to not making it out. Zoe nodded, her own experience shadowed by the same haunting memories. "I've been doing some reading," she said, pulling a thick old book from her bag, "about local legends, the forest, and its history. It seems the creature has been a guardian of sorts, a protector of the natural order, mentioned in stories going back centuries." Mia, who had been listening quietly, spoke up, her voice steady. "Do you think our offering made a difference? That it understood our respect?" "I believe so," Zoe replied. "The legends speak of the forest's spirit accepting gestures of goodwill, especially from those who show a true understanding of its significance. Maybe in its own way it let us go because we recognize that." The conversation turned to their lost friends, Jake and Lucas, whose bravery and sacrifice had given them the chance to escape. Their absence was a void no words could fill, but in sharing their grief, the women found a measure of solace. "It's hard," Mia said, tears glistening in her eyes. "Every day I expect Jake to walk through the door, laughing and telling us it's all some crazy joke. But he's not coming back. None of this feels right without him." Emma reached out, taking Mia's hand. "They saved us. They did it because they loved us. We owe it to them to keep going, to live the lives they can't." As they comforted each other, the doorbell rang, pulling them from their somber reflections. Mia answered it to find a delivery man with a large envelope. Curious, she signed for it and brought it back to the living room. Inside the envelope were documents and a letter from a local historical society. They had heard of their story and offered condolences for their loss, but they also shared something unexpected, a map of Grey Pine Forest and a collection of old photographs showing various landmarks within it. One photo in particular caught their attention. It depicted the same old cabin they had used as a sanctuary, dated over 50 years ago. On the back, written in faded ink, was a note, "Guardian's Watch, where peace was made." "The cabin," Zoe whispered, realization dawning. It wasn't just a place to hide. It was a significant part of the forest's history, maybe even a place where others had encountered the creature and survived. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, each discovery a small step toward understanding the deeper truths of their experience. They decided to donate the heirlooms and photographs to the Historical Society, hoping that by sharing their story, they could help demystify the creature
and perhaps prevent future tragedies. As they planned a memorial for Jake and Lucas, the three found a new purpose in their bond, forged through adversity and loss. They were no longer just survivors, but keepers of a profound secret, guardians of a story that would continue to be told, resonating through the ages as a testament to the thin and often blurred lines between myth and reality. Sitting together, they looked out at the setting sun, its light fading into the evening sky. The world outside went on, oblivious to the depth of their experience. But for Mia, Emma, and Zoe, life had changed irrevocably. They had peered into the shadows of the unknown and come back transformed, connected forever by the legacy of Grey Pine Forest. Months had passed since the harrowing events in Grey Pine Forest, but the shadows of that night lingered in the minds of Mia, Emma, and Zoe. Despite their efforts to move forward, a deep, unspoken restlessness haunted each of them, a nagging sensation that their encounter with the Forest Guardian was not truly resolved. It was Zoe who voiced what each of them had been feeling during one of their weekly gatherings at Mia's house. "I keep dreaming of the forest," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly with a mix of fear and resolve. "It's calling us back, isn't it?" Mia and Emma exchanged a glance, the same eerie dreams disturbing their sleep, visions of the forest enshrouded in mist and the piercing eyes of the creature watching them, its presence both menacing and sad. "We left something unfinished," Emma said, her voice a whisper. "Maybe we need to return to face it once more." The decision was made with a mix of dread and determination. They would go back to Grey Pine Forest, to confront their fears and perhaps to find closure. On a chilly evening, as autumn bled into winter, they stood once again on the threshold of the forest. The trees welcomed them with a silent, ominous whisper, the leaves rustling like soft murmurs of the past. As they walked deeper into the forest, the familiarity of the path twisted with new apprehensions. Night fell quickly, and with it, the forest seemed to close in around them, each shadow and sound magnifying their fears. They reached the old cabin just as the moon rose, its pale light casting long, sinister shadows. Inside, the cabin was just as they had left it, untouched by time or human presence. They lit a small fire in the old hearth, the flickering flames casting eerie dances of light and shadow across the walls. As the night deepened, they began to speak of their memories, of Jake and Lucas, their voices low in the haunting silence of the cabin. It was then that the air shifted, the temperature dropping, as a palpable sense of something approaching filled the space. The door swung open with a groan, and there, framed by the moonlight, stood the creature, its eyes glowing with that same haunting mix of intelligence and wildness. But there was something different, a sense of recognition, of understanding. Zoe stepped forward, her voice steady despite her trembling body. "We came back to understand why you chose to let us go, and what you want from us now." The creature's gaze held each of them in turn, its presence overwhelming yet not immediately threatening. Then, slowly, it stepped aside, its body language inviting them to follow. Led by the creature, they walked through the forest, the landscape eerily silent except for the crunch of their steps on the forest floor. They arrived at a clearing they had never seen before, where the moonlight illuminated ancient stone ruins, overgrown with moss and ivy. Here the creature stopped, and with a surprising gentleness, it placed something on the ground before them. It was an old, leather-bound book, worn by time. As Zoe picked it up, the creature retreated into the shadows, its eyes lingering on them one last time before disappearing into the night. Opening the book, they found it filled with writings and drawings that depicted the history of the forest and its guardians. The creature, they learned, was one of many, a sentinel created by ancient rituals to protect the forest from those who would harm it. As they read, understanding dawned. The creature had tested them, challenged their respect for nature's power and sanctity. By returning, they had proven themselves not as invaders, but as part of the forest's ongoing story.
With new respect and a profound sense of peace, they left the clearing, the book in their possession a token of their changed relationship with the forest. The Guardian had become, if not a friend, then a respected entity in their lives, a reminder of the delicate balance between human intrusion and natural dominion. As they exited the forest, the first light of dawn was breaking, the night's darkness lifting in a symbolic release of their fears. They were changed, not just by survival, but by an understanding that some mysteries, some ancient guardians, are not to be feared, but respected and preserved. Grapevine Forest remained behind them, silent and watchful, its secrets safe, its guardian ever vigilant. And for Mia, Emma, and Zoe, life moved forward, enriched by the knowledge that they had faced the heart of darkness and found light.